Right. Wonderful to have with me as my guest today, Mr. Vince Eager, legend of the early rock and roll in the UK. We've got some fantastic stories to tell, which I'm looking forward to hearing. Um, so tell us, before you became Vince Eager, how did you get started in music?
I was about 3 or 4, and my father was a bit of a pianist, and I just used to go and sing along. And this was 1943, 44, towards the end of the war.
Hmm.
So everybody was singing war songs and Gracie Fields and Flanagan and Allen and all that. I used to stand by the piano as my dad played and just sing along. And it was my grandma who was there one day, and she said, "You sing quite nicely." She said, "When you're 6, I'm going to enroll you in the church choir." Because grandma, nobody messed with grandma. Grandma said, "We're going to do it." We did it. And so, sure enough, when I was 6, I got registered with the St. John's Parish Church Choir in Grantham in Lincolnshire. And all I did was go along on the Sundays, you got a cassock and, vest made and all that stuff. Surplice, that was it. And I just did it and sang. And it was as if I'd never known anything different. So I progressed through, and when I got to about the age of 8, I was starting some really serious solos. And I then also, just a year later, 9 or 10, I started to go around at Christmas with the choir singing in the streets of Grantham.
Oh, I've done that.
Yeah. And I used to do that. And I was the one, because I was the smallest. Well, smallest, I was the youngest. I wasn't the smallest. I used to go around and knocking on doors with the little tin to say, for money for the church. And we used to do all right. And so I did that for 3 or 4 years. And I found that some people were putting silver, like 2 shillings or 2 and 6 in, Wow. And we used to go down these passageways where the front doors faced each other, the old terraced houses.
Yeah.
And so I'd go and I could knock on 2 doors at once, and they'd come out and they'd give you the money. And then I realised, when I was about 11, that, I was pretty confident with my voice. And I decided to break away and go solo. And I did, and I was doing brilliantly. I just used to stand in the passageways, and it sounded better, it was louder, and knock on the door again. And anyway, that sort of, I'm not saying it proved to me that you could make money by singing, but it gave me a bit of an incentive. And from there on, my next venture into showbiz was when my auntie, when I was 12 or 13, she bought me what they call a Pelham puppet. Now, Pelham puppets were the Rolls Royce of marionettes, the string puppets, and they were quite expensive. And she bought me one, and I loved it, and I got on with it. And then my dad said, "Well, why don't we make one?" And my father was a very clever guy with his hands, and he had a shed with all lathes and drills and everything. He was a very clever guy, and he helped me make a puppet. So I made one called Mr. Snodgrass, who I made as a pianist. Then we made a piano, and I was away. I had a marionette set up, and I used to go round when I was 12, 13, 14. I used to go round children's parties and do schools and actually put shows on.
Wow.
At a theatre, I just used to do it on a big table or a stage, and I did that. And I loved it, the buzz of the crowd. The next thing was, of course, my voice had getting broken, so I wasn't singing so much. And then my granddad, he worked for a very well-known company called Ruston and Hornsmith, who used to make cranes and steamrollers. And they had a drama group, and it was a very good one. They used to do a yearly panto that would run for 2 weeks, for amateur pantos.
Wow.
And that was twice daily. And the population of Grantham was only 20,000. So, it was pushing it. but they used to sell out. And anyway, my granddad enrolled me in that. And so now I'm part of the pantomime group. And I started the rehearsals, I guess, September of the year we were doing the panto. And the MD said to me, "You've got a nice voice." I said, "Oh, thank you." He said, "How would you like to do a solo?" I said, "Yeah, I'd love to." So he gave me a song called "Where Is Your Heart," which was from a well-known musical. It was anyway, French type thing. And I sang it. And the first time I sang it with all the other sort of participants of the panto stood around, I got this tremendous round of applause at the end. And
Nice.
the MD was all chuffed, and I was like, "What's going on?" Because I'd never had applause for singing. And he said to me afterwards, "You really have got a nice voice." He said, "It's breaking now," he said, "and it's just coming into its own." I said, "Oh, okay." So, I'd enjoyed my choir, but it did help me musically. But it's now on my own. So my granddad said, "Good lad," and I used to get standing ovations on that particular panto because also I was a kid. I was skinny, I was tall, looked a bit of a geek, and that was it. And then I stayed with the panto, and then my voice was really struggling because it was between breaking and whatever. And what I did was there were two other lads in the panto who were harmonica players. And I got a harmonica and I joined them, and we called ourselves the Harmonica Vagabonds. And we found out we were doing gigs around the town for various parties again, a lot of charity stuff, but some in working men's clubs.
Wow.
Then we used to play at the local cinema, the Granada, every other Sunday. And I was getting a bit bored now with not singing. So I went one night to the cinema, and we used to play there on a Sunday, every other Sunday, the Harmonica Vagabonds. And I went there, and there was they used to play music between the films. And they played this record, and they used to put up the lyrics on the screen in the cinema. So it would accompany the song. You could sing along. And they used to have this little, like a ball, white ball that bounced on the syllables.
Yeah.
So you knew what to sing. So I used to sit there and sing along. Then all of a sudden, this song comes on, and a wonderful sounding acoustic guitar. And it got a little bit faster and a little bit faster. And the little ball started speeding up. And then it was blur. Towards the end, it was a blur. It was going so fast. And I was sat there at the end, I'm going, "Oh my God, what was that?" Well, the fact that we used to play there a lot, I knew the manager well. He was a friend. We call him Uncle Harry. I went and see Uncle Harry. I said, "Uncle Harry, what was that record you just played?" He said, "Oh, I don't know, Roy. What do you mean?" I said, "I don't know." I said, "It was really good." He said, "Hang on, I'll look at it." So he found out, and he'd written it down, Rock Island Line, Lonnie Donegan. So I said, "Will you give me the paper?" He said, "Yeah." So I took the paper with it on. Next morning at 9 o'clock, I was outside the record store, and thankfully they had it in. And I bought it, took it home, and I had an old damn set record player. And you could lift the arm up and the record would repeat. And so I was home on my own. It was a day off school. It was a whole part of a holiday. And I put it on and it was playing. And I was singing along and I was just mesmerised, totally mesmerised. And my mum came in, nearly threw the damn set out the window. She said, "You must have played that 100 times." So that evening, I went up to see the boys, the other two boys. I said, "Listen to this." And we played it. And I said, "Oh, that's fab." So, cut a long story short, I got hold of a guitar, well, a banjo I had anyway. Roy, my mate, he got hold of a guitar, and Brian, the harmonica player, he got hold of a T-chest bass, which I'd read about in a music magazine how they make music in the south of New Orleans, that sort of area, Louisiana.
Yeah.
And apparently this music is called rent music. And it was used to play it just to get rent, to pay the rent. So we were all excited about this, and we started to learn the Rock Island Line. Then we learned the flip side, Lost John. So we sang it at the cinema the following week with a T-chest bass,
Wow.
2 guitars. We played it, and all they loved it. It was great. So, cut a long story short, in terms of this era, we went on to play all over the East Midlands, well, Lincolnshire, Leicestershire, all around there. We played a lot, and we were doing really well. And then we got a residency at my father's work social club. We played there. When we started the first night, we had about 50 teenagers, and within 3 months, we're up to 350.
Wow.
At 1 and 6 a time. And we used to play there every Wednesday. And now we've progressed. We bought electric guitars, double bass. We've got a drummer now instead of a washboard player, because we're starting to do Buddy Holly and Elvis songs, 1956. So they're just coming to their starting their peak.
Of course.
And we just got a load of work. And with all the money we'd saved over this sort of year we did, or probably 8 months we'd done, we didn't quite know what to do. And somebody pointed out that there was a weekend magazine came out weekly, and it was holding a World Skiffle Championship, and it was being sponsored by Mecca, and it was being held at Mecca venues throughout the country. So the next thing you know is we enter this competition to see if we can play in it, and we're told yes. And we finished up playing about 6 weeks on the trot at the Nottingham Palais, which was a Mecca ballroom. And we then find out that the final is going to be on BBC television, on Come Dancing, which was a precursor to Strictly Come Dancing.
Yeah.
It's been going all these years. So we went down to London for the final. There were 6 groups. They made us play in the afternoon to pick 3. We got 3. We were one of them. It was live that night on television, November 14th, 1957. And there were 2 other groups. One was from Birmingham, I think it was, and the other one were 6 boys from a Jewish orphanage in North London. So we were told by the BBC crew, said, you guys are going to walk it. No problem. So we're all a bit cocky. We go on, we come second. And the group from the orphanage, the Jewish orphanage in North London, they won it. They got 200 quid. We got 150, and the third got a 50. And it wasn't until a few hours later, it was the next day, that we discovered that all of the judges were Jewish, and so was Mecca was owned by the Jewish company, and the Jewish orphanage band. Everybody said we should have won, but it didn't at all turn me against the Jewish population. I finished up actually had more Jewish friends than English probably, but it was just one of those things when you sort of realise, wow, show business, Jewish people. Of course, there's lots of people, great artists as well. So we rode with that. And the next day, with 150 quid burning a hole in the pocket, we bought an amplifier and other stuff. And then we decided to go to the Two Eyes Coffee Bar.
Wow.
That was on Old Compton Street. And we went there the following afternoon, having spent a few quid on amplifier and a guitar for Roy or something. And we went there, and initially the guy said, we're full tonight, you can't play. And I said, that's a shame because we're on television last night. What? We're on television? So what do you mean you're on television? I said, we came second in the World Skiffle Championships. He said, really? I said, yeah. said, go and fetch your gear. Get your gear. You're on. And we finished up playing all night. And no other band got looking. He just said, no, keep playing. And all they gave was between the sets. We did about 5 sets. All they gave us was either coffee or Coke, along with a Blue River biscuit. That's what we got for the night. That's what we got. And when we finished, he offered us a residency there.
Wow.
And it was owned by 2 wrestlers called Paul Lincoln and Ray Hunter. And they were 2 characters. But anyway, we came home to Grantham. I got the all clear from my company. I think they're glad to see the back of me. I'd been a joiner with a building company.
Right.
Brian, bass player, was a bit of a floater. He did 2 or 3 different jobs. And Roy was doing an apprenticeship. But we decided to do it. And this was November. And we went back in February to take up the residency. And he said we were on £20 a week. I thought, oh, that's great. And it wasn't until the first week that we discovered it was for the 4 of us.
Oh.
I said, he said, yeah. He said, but I'll tell you what I'll do. He said, I'll get you some Sunday concerts. He said, you'll earn good money.
Yeah.
All right. And we did one at the Gaumont Coventry, and Marty Wilde was the headliner. And Thomas Steele's brother Colin Hicks was a support act, and we were the support act, 3rd act on the bill. We went really well. It was great. It was an absolute buzz, you know.
Are you still the Vagabonds at this stage?
Yeah, still the Vagabonds. Well, we changed from the Harmonica Vagabonds to the Vagabonds Skiffle group.
Skiffle, yeah.
And we get on the coach and we go back. And Larry Parnes, who proved to be, sat by me on the coach and said, I'm going to sign you up. He said, I'm going to make you into a big star like Tommy and Marty. And of course, when you're 17, you know, was it, what?
Yeah.
I said, oh, great. The boys will be thrilled. He said, we can't take your boys for now, your band. They'll have to come later. I want to establish you first. Then we can get that. You can have the band. I said, okay. And basically, that's how it all started with Larry Parnes.
Wow. You know, that's amazing. So you're 17 at this stage. Now, what was it? One thing I'm always interested about with Skiffle, what music were you listening to before, you know, and what were you playing with the harmonicas before Rock Island Line hits? We
were doing folk and country, but a country and a bit of rock and roll was coming through. Stuff like, I think, Money Honey, and what was the Little Richard one we used to do? Anyway, that's what we were doing. Initially, the Skiffle, we played the Skiffle.
Yeah.
That was it. Then slowly but surely, the Americans, you know, they started having this impact with their rock and roll and blues. Yeah. And we came on to that, and we started doing that. And when we sort of got to this stage that we are with Larry Parnes, I mean, Brian, the bass player, who I had nicknamed Licorice, that was down to, we were working in Skegness for a weekend at the holiday camps. And on the way there, we used to go from Grantham. We used to go via Boston. And Boston had this wonderful, what they called a milk bar. That they used to Coke and teas and all that. No booze, but it was called a milk bar. But they always had a jukebox. So we used to stop at Boston because it was nearly a halfway point from Grantham. And when we got there, we used to sit and play stuff on the jukebox. And we came out one day, and next door there was this sort of news agents, but they used to sell loads of stuff like beach balls and swimming ring and all that sort of stuff for people on the way to the coast.
Yeah.
And when we came out, we said, oh, let's go in here. We went in, and they sold plastic toy instruments, mainly the clarinet, the saxophone, and the trumpet. And they all worked on the principle of a piece of tissue paper over a grill, and you didn't blow hard, you breathed and it got this sort of sound.
Yeah.
It all sounded the same, the instruments, be they different, they all sounded exactly the same. So we're going along in the car, in the van, to Skegness, and Brian is playing this clarinet. And he's playing and playing, and I'm playing one of the saxophone. Roy had a clarinet as well. And we get to Skegness. By now, Roy and I have had enough, so we're not playing. But Brian was still playing this bloody clarinet. So we get there, and the driver says, right, we're here, lads, come on, get out. So we all get out, but Brian, who sits in the back, and he's still playing his clarinet. And I knew that the nickname for a clarinet was a licorice stick, because it was black and long.
Oh, of course.
And I said, come on, Licorice, get out of there. And that's how Brian Licorice Locking, who later was with the Shadows, came about.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
That was that sort of, and we did the weekends, and, but Brian, and now that name is,
of course,
we still remain the best of pals until his untimely death. But he's a great guy, great musician, amazing, But so that's a sort of up to coming professional.
Yeah. So there you get to Larry Parnes, and he was sort of impresario, whatever. But he had this whole thing of changing everybody's names, and of course, Marty Wilde and Tommy Steele were there, Billy Fury, and you become Vince Eager. Yeah. So what did you think about that?
I didn't. Well, Billy wasn't with us yet. Billy was yet to be discovered.
Of course, yeah.
So the only acts Larry had were Tommy, Marty, and Tommy's brother, Colin Hicks. Didn't have any more, so I was the fourth to come along.
Right.
And regarding a name, we couldn't come up with one initially. And then he said something about, he mentioned Vince. And I said, well, I'm a Gene Vincent fan, and my brother's middle name is Vincent. He said, we'll call you Vince. I said, oh, okay. And he said, you seem very eager to get on, so we'll call you Vince Eager. And it was like that. A matter of minutes, not even an hour, sorting it.
Yeah. And
within an hour, he'd phoned Decca Records and got me a deal.
Wow.
An audition. But I couldn't use the boys then.
Yeah.
Brian and Roy. He said, you've got to have pro musicians, studio guys. So I did. And we did the session, and it went well. And one of the tracks, which really knocked me out, was for a movie that was going to be there. And I was singing the title track. And that what was it called? Oh, God. Anyway, it'll come to that. But I did all this, and it was weird in a way, because he was gay, and it was Larry, and he hit on me, and I didn't take to it kindly.
Yeah.
And he sort of seemed to let it go. But another thing was, he had this plush flat in Knightsbridge. I mean, a really expensive flat. When you did the washing up, you're looking at the Albert Hall. Seriously, crazy. On Gloucester Road, number 7, Lindsay House. Beautiful place. But, I stayed there with another guy, guitarist called Kenny Packard. And when the second day that I was there, I'd already got a record deal with Decca on the phone. That happened. He told me about some dates I was going to do, and we need to get the band together. But also I found out that he was gay, well, obviously because he'd hit on me the night before. But I also found out that he had a lover, an American, and his name was Johnny Ray. And Larry was having it off, well, not just having it off, they were partners, with Johnny Ray and Larry Parnes. Now, in those days, it was illegal.
Yeah, of course, it's criminal offence, wasn't it?
And my brother was a copper, and my dad said to me when I went to London, you do anything to get into trouble, your brother could lose his job. So more so than anybody, I was married. So that was it. And it was strange because when I did the Decca session, it went so well. I mean, I couldn't believe it. Did it in a day. I didn't use my boys because they weren't recording standard yet, but I used all the top musicians of the day: Ivan Rancy, guitarist; Mike Sam, singers; Ronnie Verrill, Ted Heath's drummer; and Johnny Hawksworth, who was the bass player. I got these guys, top session guys, and I did these 5 tracks in a day, and I was all excited. And then about 10 days to 2 weeks later, I happened to say to Larry, when will my record be released? He said, we've had a change of plans. I said, what's that? He said, well, what we're going to do is, he said, I'm going to form my own label. Now, his name was Lawrence Morris Parnes. Initials LMP. He said, I've started my new label and it's called LMP. ELEMPI. His initials. I said, and he said, you're going to be the first artist. I said, well, what about songs I recorded for Decca? Yeah. Oh, they'll probably come out later. And I knew there was a couple of them really good songs.
Yeah.
And Dick Rowe, who had recorded me, said, you're going to have a hit, lad. Don't worry, you're going to have a hit with one of these. There were 3 that he reckoned could really go big. So I was all excited with this, of course. Until I find out I'm not with Decca anymore. So Larry's formed this label called LMP Records. He's broken the contract with Decca. And he starts this label, but nobody will print it, and you can't get it pressed because they're dealing with the big companies. EMI, they have their own print, and they couldn't get it printed. So there was I'd made 5 good records for a first timer, and they couldn't get released. And in the end, Decca bought them out on an EP called Vince Eager and the Vagabonds. That was it. Wasted. So then I became like a table tennis ball. One company one side, one the other, and Parnes was pushing me around. And I never was a song, well, not at that time I wasn't writing songs. I've written a few since, which are pretty good. But I didn't even think of that. And so I think that I don't even know what the release of my first record was. But I made loads of records. But Parnes wasn't getting me the publicity. And even I fell out with Parnes over the death of Eddie Cochran. And I just said I would never work for him again. And so he said, right. He said, you can't work for me, and you can't work for anybody else. So finish what I build you for now, and that's it. So I sort of said, okay. So I did a few gigs that year, one of them being with Billy Fury at the Britannia Pier, Great Yarmouth. And Billy was really upset because Billy and I were living together. We were very close, good pals. And then I couldn't sign with another label because Larry had signed me to some other top rank. And it was a total mess. And he was such a queen. He was such a queen about it. You know, nasty queen. And because Eddie Cochran since then became very good friend, very dear friend, when we toured together in 1960. And then Larry, the way he treated Larry, Eddie's death as a publicity opportunity to really get a lot of publicity. And Eddie didn't like him, and here was he going to do this big tribute to Eddie Cochran with Gene Vincent, Billy, myself, and I refused to do it. I said, no, I'm not. because of the way he treated Eddie. He treated Eddie crap toward the end, and he was just making money off the back of Eddie. So I didn't do the tour, but I did do the summer season with Billy. By then I wasn't talking to Parnes.
Yeah.
My brother-in-law, my sister's husband, he was dealing, and he couldn't really strike a deal with him, and he just said you can't work for 2 years in the business.
Wow.
Well, anyway, I didn't take any notice of that, and I started doing gigs. But it was sad because the start had been so promising.
Yeah.
With Decca particularly. In fact, Dick Rowe left Decca and he went to launch Top Rank Records. And I joined Top Rank. And I did some good records with Top Rank. But the thing was, Larry wouldn't push me for the publicity. I couldn't get the publicity. But I did some good records, and some, in hindsight, possibly I shouldn't have done. Like, I did a version of Marty Robbins' El Paso, all 16 verses and 2,000 choruses. I did that. And everybody said I made a good job of it. I mean, not to be compared with Marty Robbins, but it was, and I did a load of stuff with Top Rank, a load of stuff. And I couldn't push it, but Parnes wouldn't let me do. And that was another reason why I said, throw the towel in. Yeah. But he was not a nice man. And the worst part about it was, of all the records I did sell over the years, and songs I wrote, or not I wrote, but songs I had published, I never got a penny. And I was asked to do something, I forget what it was now, but I was asked to do something, and they said, we can give you a couple of £100. It was for a movie, I think. We'll give you a couple of £100. I said, okay. It never came out, but I did get £200. But then, Morrissey?
Yeah.
Morrissey. Of course you do. Morrissey, well, what happened was a very weird one. I hadn't had any record royalties because I used to phone up EMI initially, who I was with. They said, no, Mr. Parnes or LMP gets all your royalties. And then I went to Top Rank and they had to do the same. I did get a few quid at the end, but with Top Rank, I recorded a song called The World's Loneliest Man. Now, turn the clock forwards, I suppose, 50 years, 45 years. And I'm sat at home one evening, and I'd already found out that Morrissey's favourite record was me singing The World's Loneliest Man. Because he had a thing about it. So much so that when he went overseas and he stayed in hotels, he would sometimes sign in the hotel as Vince Eager.
Go away.
Yeah. And so there was this thing about Morrissey. And he came to Nottingham to play. And the local press, the editor of the Nottingham Evening Post, which when he came was 12 years ago, 15, was a big newspaper, and I had a big, covering. The editor phoned and says, how do you fancy meeting Morrissey, seeing as how you're respected in the club? I said, yeah, I'd love to. I said, okay. Anyway, a few days later, he said he didn't want to meet him. I said, really? He says, no. Now, in the meantime, Morrissey had released a new record and made my record, The World's Loneliest Man, the B-side. So there you buy a record by Morrissey, and I'm on the B-side. So I thought, So I phone up Top Rank, not Top Rank, EMI, and I find out now that all my rights are owned by Warner Brothers Music. So I phoned Warner Brothers and said, well, we're awfully sorry, we can't do anything about it. I said, oh, that's great. Well, I'd already had there was something happened. Oh, I know, with the Oh Boy original. Oh, do you know the Oh Boy show?
Yeah.
Big show. I did that a number of times. On the Oh Boy show, we did an album. Cliff, myself, Marty wasn't on it because he was with Phillips. This was with EMI. I didn't get a penny off that. It went to number one. I didn't get a penny. This is when I'm with Parnes. Didn't get a nickel. So, you put that down to bad luck. So, about 20 years later, they do another Oh Boy series in colour because it was black and white when we did it. So we did it in colour. And they re-released the album and it went to number one. Now, there's a group on it called the Dallas Boys. It was a good group. And I was very pally with the boys. And I don't know how many years ago it would be, probably about 25, 30 years ago. I'd had a very successful career with cabaret and shows with a band I had called the Clockwork Toys. We used to do cruising, and we did really well. And it was a good band. And we split up after 7 years amicably. In fact, we're all still the best of mates. It was when you've ran your time out and you want to do something. So in Nottingham, we had a great nightclub called the Heart of the Midlands. And we used to work it as an act. And it was one of the last places we worked. It was about September, I forget the year. And I'm at the bar with the owner. And he said, so what you do when we're having you back? I said, we're splitting up. I said, oh, no, you can't. Because it was a good act. It was a good act.
Yeah.
Comedy as well. I had a little guy who did Norman Wisdom, and he was his double. So with my 6'5", and it was a good cabaret act. And I said, we're calling it a day. We've done 7 years. He said, you can't. I said, why? He said, well, you can't. It's so good. I said, no, we've all had it up. And I said, we're still good pals, and we need to stay that way. They said, oh, what are you going to do? I said, I don't know yet. I haven't made my mind up. Might do ships, cruising. I was off there. He said, do you fancy comparing? I said, where? Because he had 2 clubs. He said, here, you live in Nottingham. Why don't you come and do a couple of months for us?
Yeah.
All right, great. Now, I hadn't seen the Dallas Boys for 30 years. And they were on the original Boy. And they're booked for a week at the Heart of the Midlands. And yours truly is the compare. So when they laughed, Vince, we're chatting away. And the leader of Leon, we're having a drink one night. And he says to me, well, have you got your check yet for the new Oh Boy release? I said, no, why? I said, well, the new Oh Boy said they've re-released ours because the new one was a hit. So they decided to re-release the old one. I said, oh, no, I haven't. He said, you should get a check. We got one. I said, really? He said, yes. Wow. I phoned EMI. I'm terribly sorry, but, Mr. Parnes gets all your checks. This is like, 30 years later, 40 years later. I said, well, I being sold now, I'm one of the artists. It's nothing to do with Parnes. Yeah, I'm afraid it is. I said, well, I said, that, it's just not fair. And I had enough. So she phoned me back and she said, I've been chewing over your story. She said, that's not right. It's not right. She said, would you like to put it in writing and send it to me? Well, this, I think, was before we had emails. So I posted it. And I didn't hear anything for probably 8 weeks, 10 weeks. And then I got a check in the post from EMI Productions, or Publishing, EMI Publishing, for over £1,000 for my royalties from this sale. And she'd put it to Larry Parnes, and he had agreed to let me have it.
Wow.
Then there was another one with Morrissey, and he put my record on the flip side of his.
Yeah.
Also used it in a movie called Morrissey. So they've got me singing it. I was at home one night. One of my granddaughters, Libby, she phoned me. She said, "Grandad, I've just been listening to you at the cinema." I said, "Oh, yeah, what was that?" She said, "You were singing World's Loneliest Man at the end of Morrissey." I said, "What?" She said, "Yeah." Well, I knew I was his favourite, or it was his favourite song. So she said, "Well, it was really good. Have you seen it?" I said, "I didn't even know it existed." So once again, I phone up EMI, but they're nothing to do with it now. They've sold the catalogue to Warner Brothers Music. So I speak to a lady, and she was very nice. She was only like, not in a very high position, but she was on quite high up the ladder. And she said, "I sympathise with you on this." I said, "Because," then I said, "It's being played at the end of Morris's movie. He's put it on the flip side of one of his." I said, "And I'm, getting nothing for it." She said, "Well, just leave it with me." So I left it with her for about, 6 weeks' time. She phoned me back and she said, "I've managed to sort it out and you'll be getting a cheque in the post." I said, "Oh, thank you." And a few days later, I got a cheque for $1.5 grand.
Nice.
Should have gone to Parnes. So I phoned her and thanked her. And I said, "How did it come about?" She said, "Well, to be truthful, we contacted Mr. Parnes and we were in a position to say it was grossly unfair that all these years you'd taken his. Don't you think it would be a nice touch for once to let him have for the verse?" And so I got a cheque for 1,500. So $2.5 grand, 20 years after.
Yeah.
So it was a tough business, for me, but I got some great stuff out of it. It was 1959, and I was working with Marty on a one-nighter tour, and we were in Blackpool, and Larry came up, which was unusual because you didn't usually come that far north, and then for any reason, and he came up, and during the first half, I was closing the first half, Martin second, and while I was getting ready, he said, "I've got oh no, I know what it was. Ahead of myself. He'd phoned me to tell me that I was going to be on a bill in January. It was headlined by Gene Vincent." And I said, "Wow, that's it." I was over the moon.
Imagine.
And he said, and I said, "Can I close the first half? Because that's obviously the second prime spot on the bill." He said, "Yeah, of course you can." He said, "I was going to put you there anyway." I said, "Oh, that's fantastic." So I was elated, brilliant. And we go to Blackpool. Now, this was November time. And he comes up and he comes to my dressing room and he said, "Oh, I've got some news for you." I said, "What's that?" He said, "The bill with Gene Vincent, Eddie Cochran's on it as well." I said, "Seriously?" He says, "Yeah." I said, "Oh, brilliant. That's fantastic." Because I used to open my act with "Come On Everybody." Well, come on, everybody. And then all of a sudden I thought, "Oh, I won't be able to do that number." He said, "No, you." I said, "Oh, blimey." I said, "What about closing the first half?" He said, "No, Gene's going to close the first half." I said, "Oh, okay." Or I was a bit depressed now. Anyway, come the tour, 24th of January 1960, the boys and my band and I were working up north the night before. So we had to drive to Ipswich, and we missed the sound check because we had a long way to travel. But anyway, so I've got this dressing room, which is for a cinema, was a beautiful dressing room. 2 big armchairs, and really nice. So now I'm closing the first half, and he's on before me. So I decided to go watch him from the front. So I got all my slap on, the stage clothes, and I put an overcoat on And I went round the front of the house, stood at the back and watched Eddie. And the compere introduces him. And now, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Eddie Cochran, the place erupts. I'm stood at the back watching. I'm already got a coat on. And I'm looking, and he comes on. No, he stood there. It was a blackout intro. And then when a spotlight comes on, it hits him in the back, and he's got his back to the audience. He's got this orange shirt on, his orange guitar around his back, black leather jeans, and all he is you see his back. You see nothing else. And the compere, Billy Raymond, offhand, off stage, voiceover, ladies and gentlemen, all the way from America, Mr. Eddie Cochran. The girls are screaming, the guys are going, come on, Eddie. Dun, 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 dun. And it was the intro to What I Say, which was a Ray Charles number.
Yeah.
You remember the Ray Charles, What I Say?
Yeah.
Well, it was that. And I thought, oh, blimey. And I've got my sort of day clothes over my stage clothes. Oh, crikey, the place is going mental. And he keeps going. Then he turns round on the tacit when it stops. He turns round. Say, Mama, don't you do me wrong. We hadn't heard this song, What I Say. It was a Ray Charles song. And Georgie Fame was playing for Eddie this night. And Georgie since said, when you think about it, we'd never heard that. And he just played it at the start. And the audience went crazy. And he finished it. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I've got to follow this. And he just finishes this, What I Say. And then he says, bear in mind we're in Ipswich. He just stands there and said, well, ladies and gentlemen, it's great to be here in Ipswich. Ipswich. I turned, it wasn't Larry, it was somebody else next to me. I said, Ken Howell. He's a bloody comedian as well. What's going on? I can't follow that. So I dejectedly rushed to the rear of the theatre, to the side stage to take over from him. And they just didn't want to leave off the stage. Now, I just finished a TV series. They'd seen me every Saturday night if they wanted to. And I've been around. So they weren't worried about me. So they compare Billy Raymond introduces me. And there's boos and there's get off Eddie and blah, blah, blah.
Oh.
So I did I can't remember, was it 2 or 3 numbers for this heckling and total, unconcern about people. They didn't want me being there. And my biggest number is always, most of the time, has been the Conway Twitty Tony Makers. Because I was a massive Johnny Ray fan.
Yeah.
And Johnny Ray was the cry guy. And I used to love Johnny Ray. And I used to be able to cry, on stage. Turn it on. I don't know how, but I did it. So it was a 3rd number in my act this night. And there's still total unrest in the audience because Eddie's gone. And I just did the intro, Hero Caesar, we carried on. And all of a sudden, they quietened down. And, tears coming down my face and really selling it. And at the end, they all erupted. They went pretty crazy. And I was over the moon. Did 2 of the songs, which were brilliant, and they received and got off. And I thought, oh, God, I can't believe I saved it. Went to my dressing room, wasn't sharing, just on my own, this old leather armchair, took my stage clothes off, put my bathrobe on, wet through, sat there, thought, oh, God, I can't believe that. And there's a knock at the door. And I said, yeah, come in. So I stand up to see who it is. And it's Eddie in a bathrobe and a towel around his neck. And he said, man, I'm Eddie Cochran. He said, that's the best I've ever seen in that song. You're amazing. You're awesome. And all the superlatives that come in from him said, oh, right. Sits himself down. And we became the best of friends.
Brilliant.
He I was going to go to America with him, and the day he was killed, I was at the airport waiting for him. And we just had a great relationship whilst he was here. Unfortunately, I didn't see as much of him as I would have liked to have done because I was in the Eurovision Song Contest that year, in the British heats, not the it was the heats.
Yeah.
I had this absolutely bloody awful song. I forget what it was called now. Anyway, I had this song, and therefore I couldn't do all the dates with Eddie because I was working at the office. Larry, on the assumption I would get, because I wanted the top 2 or 3 to start with. And Larry was convinced, because of my success on TV with drum beat, didn't matter I didn't have a hit record with it, but I was the one that was going to be the British rep. So come the time when we're at the BBC recording, well, not rehearsing the thing, Larry says to me, I want you to look very special. So he bought me a fabulous suit, beautiful suit, cost a lot of money, over 100 quid in 1960.
Wow.
Suit, shoes that were 25 quid, made to measure, Anello and David. Oh, a fabulous outfit, really classy. And he had my bloody hair done and all sorts. Look, the dog bollocks, so he said. So come the show, on the evening, how they judged it, this is the British contingent, how they got the best of the Brits. What they used to have judges in regions of the BBC, like BBC West, BBC Southeast, BBC Lancashire, whatever. And there are all these, there's about 10 different representative groups, 4 people on a panel. Now, what I didn't know was that for the show, you're supposed to wear evening suit with a dicky belt. That was compulsory. Oh. You look at any of them from those days, all the guys and the ladies were in cocktail dresses.
Yeah.
You know, and that was it. And yours truly goes on, and he's got this. Probably my outfit probably cost more than all the others, particularly the guys who rented them, you know. But I went on and I did it. It wasn't a very good song, to be honest. But when it came to the judges, everybody gave me 0 because of my dress. I was an insult. You should have known it was They didn't talk about the song, which was crap, and never really about my performance. It was all about my dress. And a few weeks later, I was up in Scotland doing a gig with my band. We used to work there a lot. And the guy tried to bottle me. A guy in a kilt tried to bottle me. And thankfully, the dancers in the ballroom pulled him back. And he said, "Yeah, that's Sassenach. He didn't wear the fucking right clothes. You should at all." Really, yeah. Oh, it made a lot of big publicity because I did that. So that was, and Eddie was, with regards to this, I couldn't do the tour with Eddie because Larry was convinced I was going to get through, so I didn't have much work in. So I sort of saw him at various stages, and then he said, you know, we'd already arranged for me to go to America with him. And then come the day, he was travelling from Bristol. I was already on my way down from Grantham to Gene Vincent's flat where I was going to meet them. But they didn't turn up. So I phoned Eddie's manager and he told me to go to the airport. They probably had a party last night and they'd come straight from the gig or wherever to in Bristol to the airport. So I went in, my roadie, Noel, always used to wait until a train had left or a plane had left if he wasn't travelling until I left. And on this occasion, he was waiting to my flights. And we got there at 11. The flight was at 1. And I was in the VIP lounge, and I was sat next to Count Basie. You ever heard of Count Basie?
Oh, yeah.
And he was on a European tour, and he was flying home to New York in Chicago because his father had died. So he wasn't good for conversation. So I'm sat there, twiddling my thumbs, and there's an announcement. Mr. Eager go to the reception, and I was in the VIP lounge. So I went to reception, and they said, we've got a call for it. And it was a guy called Dennis Atherton, who was Larry's chief press officer. And he said, there's been an accident, and Eddie and Gene were involved. He said, and Gene's very, very badly injured, but Eddie's not so bad. So Eddie can travel. So you wait here, and Eddie will join you. I said, right, okay. I was worried about Gene. I wasn't as close to him as Eddie. I was worried about him. And then I got another call about 20 minutes later, and it's Larry. What are you doing there? Your best friend supposedly is in the hospital dying. And I said, well, hang on. I said, I'm waiting for Eddie to go to America. We'll record it. We'll get a record. And he said, what do you mean? He said, Eddie is close to death's door. And I'd explain, and they got the message wrong. It wasn't Gene. It was Eddie. So my driver was still there, thankfully. And he said, come on, we'll get down to the hospital. Drove to the hospital, St. Martin's in Bath. And I went in, the receptionist saw me straight away. So Mr. Eager recognised me. And she said, I'll take you to see the surgeon. So Noel was with me. So we went in and talked to him. And he said, I'm afraid he's not going to make it. And he told us technical stuff. What his brain been damaged, terrible mess. Of course, I was absolutely gobsmacked, Yeah, and that was the start, really, of my really having got Parnes, because when I got outside the hospital, there was Larry Parnes with Marty's manager, a guy called Norm Riley, Billy Fury, and Dickie Pride were all there, and Larry started playing the press as he always did. And the first thing is, Eddie was still alive, by the way. And this was about 2:15, and Eddie didn't die until 4:20. And Parnes is saying, it's such a shame because his next record is 3 Steps to Heaven. And I was really pissed off with that.
Oh.
Billy was there, and it was Billy's 20th birthday. And it was bad, and I left at that point, and I went back to London, and I stayed with some friends and kept out of the way. But Parnes just used, this was a split, the way Parnes used Eddie's demise to get publicity. And he already, apparently within days, had a bill put together in his memory. He was horrible man in that regard. No feeling.
They're just trying to cash in.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I went to stay with friends. I didn't even stay in my flat in Paddington at the time. I didn't even stay there. I said to Noel, drive me to Gene, where I had some very close friends. And I said, nobody will find me there. And that's where I went. And, it was, then the headlines were, which made it worse, on the Monday, and I've got the headlines to this day saying, teen idol killed in car crash, pop singer Vince Eager to travel with the body. And there's more publicity, you see, Larry thinking. And there's 2 or 3 papers ran that story. And I'd refused, and I just stayed in this place. I phoned my parents. They were the only ones who knew I was fine and where I was. I didn't go out, stayed in the house. And there was one article that it was all publicity with Parnes. There was one article in the Daily Mail, I think it was, no, Daily Mirror, the headlines, Vince Eager to a company body. And they'd said that Larry had said, oh, Vince will travel to America and he'll travel with Eddie's body. Make it all dramatic, you know. And that was really, to be truthful, last nail in the coffin, my coffin. And that's how it finished. And, you know, I kept in touch with Larry's family, but I never got to meet them. And his mum was distraught. And I did regret not going. Had it not been for the publicity I didn't want, I wouldn't have gone. Not with that. But then afterwards, you know, 3 Steps to Heaven and all that, it got to me. It was bad.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, I've regretted not going. I've regretted it all my life.
Yeah, no, I can understand. But it's a traumatic thing. You know, you're at a young age. There's this young man you've got to know. You become friends, and there's horrendous tragedy.
Oh, it is.
How do you process that when you've got a manager who's not interested in how you are?
You're right. You're absolutely right. He had no concern for my well-being.
No.
And of course, all of a sudden, Gene's in hospital as well, and Gene's not so bad. So he talked to Gene's management, and before Eddie was cold, they got this package show put together in Eddie's memory. And it's like 3 Steps to Heaven, the song. He didn't play it when he was over here. He played it to me, played it in the car. He'd never played it publicly, you know, and it was 3 Steps to Heaven because it was going to be released, I don't know, well, probably about 6 weeks later or 4 weeks later in England. But it was quite weird. You know, it was quite weird. You got again. Yeah, you're back. You just went. Did you freeze? Yeah. It was a bad period. Bad period for me.
Yeah. Did you think of giving up everything, show business and everything?
I did, but I had some really good friends, you know, and they talked me through it. And I suppose in a weird sort of way, I was determined not to let Eddie's name sort of die in vain or to disappear. And so I did. And I don't regret it one bit. I'm glad. In fact, I wish, knowing what I know now, I could have done more, but I wasn't wise enough in those days to do anything about it. But
he's still young.
Yeah, he was a wonderful bloke. I mean, when we toured, we went to my mum and dad's. My mum was an amazing pastry cook. Amazing. She made the best apple pie. And when we got out the house, she said, God, your mum's apple pie is amazing. So then my mum would make apple pie. And when I could, I'd pick it up in Grantham and take it to Eddie and Gene. They used to love their apple pie. Yeah. Lovely guy. He was a lovely.
So what was Gene Vincent like? Because you said, he was one of those heroes.
Gene was, I mean, I used to love Gene Vincent's music. I absolutely loved it. And when I first got to work with him, to meet him, first time I worked with him was when I was on the bill with Eddie. He was a lovely guy and very, very well mannered. And, you know, it was like when you think 17-year-old or 18-year-old kid from the heart of potato country who is with one of the biggest rock and roll legends, heroes in the world, and you're talking on a bit of an equal basis in a way. It's hard to take in. But I did get on well with Gene, but it's just that it was very erratic. You didn't know what Gene you were going to find. Well, Gene you were going to find. He was full of good intentions a lot of the time. I remember my wife was my wife with her first kid. I guess she was probably about 8.5 months pregnant. And I got a phone call from a band called the Puppets. And the Puppets were a 3-piece guitar, bass, drums from Preston. And they'd backed me on some overseas tours. And they were brilliant and really good pals. And they were doing the summer season in Blackpool with Gene backing it. And I get a phone call from, trying to think of the guitarist's name, the drummer's name, Des O'Reilly. Des phones me and he said, Vince, he said, Gene wants to know if you'll come to Blackpool. I suppose this was 1964. That's when 65. So this is 5 years after. So I said, oh, great. He said he wants you to come up to Blackpool. He'll pay your hotel, everything. I said, no, I don't have to do that. I said, I'll come up. I said, in fact, I said, I'll bring the wife, I'll come up. So I arranged it and we went up. And I went round backstage to say hi before the show. And he said, oh, you're staying overnight. Come and stay with me. I said, no, we got a hotel, but we'll come and see you after. He said, yeah, I'm having a party. I said, oh, okay, we'll come and have a party. My wife was like 8.5 months pregnant. So we see the show, and it was one of the best I've ever seen him do. It was awesome. It was absolutely awesome. And the audience are going crazy. And then he says, I'd like you to not to scream for a little bit while I tell you this little story. His real Virginia drawl. And he went on to say, when I came over to England, meaning him, he said, I had the pleasure of working with a guy over here who's become a really good friend. He's a close friend of Eddie and mine, and I'd like to introduce Vince Eager. And he made me stand up in stalls.
Wow.
Everybody went, yeah. And so we went back to his place afterwards for the party. And my wife only had a couple of drinks, in fairness, which she shouldn't have had those. But we stayed there and we finished up not going to the hotel. We slept in the spare room Gene had in his house. and we went home to Nottingham. And funnily enough, we got home on the Monday morning and she had a clinic in the afternoon for a pregnancy, maternity clinic. And she went and I dropped her off. And then when I went to pick her up, the nurse came out. She said, Mr. Taylor. I said, yeah. She said, oh, just to let you know, your wife's staying in for a couple of days. I said, why? What's wrong? She said, nothing, but I understand you had a nice party over the weekend. I think she had toxemia, high blood pressure.
No.
Yeah. So, yeah, and that was that. So he was a party animal. They both were. Eddie and Gene were party animals. But yeah, that was... And you know, the funniest thing was, my son Simon, he's got a great band. He's a great musician. He's got a great band. But when he was... So how long would he be about? Well, his mother and I split up when he was about 12, 14. And I still obviously kept in touch and saw them all the time. And I saw him one day, picked him up to take him out. And he said, oh, I bought an LP today, Dad. I said, who's that? He said, a guy called Gene Vincent. And he didn't know that I knew him.
Oh, right.
I said, well, did your mum not tell you that you've pretty much met him? Not able to talk, but you met him. She says, no. I said, well, tell your mother, what about Blackpool? And in fairness, she said, oh, yeah, I hadn't thought of that. And so she told him the story. Yeah, the first one he bought was Gene Vincent.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. And he's got a band now, and he still does a bit of Gene Vincent and Eddie Cochran.